I'm Lila, and I'm
I don't know what I am, really. What are any of us?
What are we? When I was out at this burner wedding adventure gig, this 6-year-old boy, very cute, very adorable. I refrained from commenting on his cuteness because I don't want to reinforce the idea that you're lovable only because you're cute. So I did not comment on his cuteness, but he came up to me and he said, "Should we be friends?" And I was like, I'm pretty sure that the answer to that is yes. And then his little brother came up to me a little bit later and said, "What are you?" And I was like,
oh my gosh.
What? Last time I checked, I was human.
Yeah.
But I was wearing long pink braids and very shiny things and a snowsuit. And so, I probably looked galactic,
Yeah, he's like, I don't have a category for you yet.
Yes.
I have category for woman, which maybe you are, but you seem like you don't really fit in that box particularly well. There's
little uncategorizable.
More than that. Oh, that's cute. Isn't that
what
sweet?
Are you?
That's a really deep question.
I know. I was like, it took me back. I wondered how to properly answer that.
Right.
What are you?
Yeah. Well, how much time do you have,
Stardust?
Yeah.
Sex positive culture.
It's my body to give.
Are threesome gifts a thing?
Taking a bath.
I like your bed.
Horizontal.
This is Horizontal with Lila.
I'm Lila, and I'm horizontal in a hotel in Midtown Manhattan.
I'm Dr. Alexandra Solomon, and I am horizontal with Lila.
Horizontal is slow radio about intimacies of all kinds. It is entirely recorded while reclining. I think of it as consensual eavesdropping. We're lying down, wearing robes, sharing secrets in your ears. In this episode, I lie down with Dr. Alexandra Solomon, clinical psychologist, author of books, Northwestern University Professor, and creator of the internationally renowned undergrad course Marriage 101, which I wish was taught to every incoming freshman in college, and ideally every outgoing senior in high school, and really to every adult everywhere who didn't take that class across the world. I read about the course a few years back, long before I met Alexandra in person, in an article in The Atlantic titled, "The First Lesson of Marriage 101, There Are No Soulmates." In Marriage 101, she guides students through both book learning and experiential means towards relational self-awareness, guiding them through an understanding of attraction, conflict, sex, and forgiveness. Who doesn't need this class? We all need this class. I need this class. Alexandra's entire body of work, it seems, is devoted to guiding us to make healthy, conscious choices in love. Her 2017 book, Loving Bravely, 20 Lessons of Self-Discovery to Help You Get the Love You Want, is an ongoing dose of compassion. And I imagine that her forthcoming book, Taking Sexy Back, How to Own Your Sexuality and Create the Relationship You Want, will be a guide to undoing the shame that most of us were indoctrinated with by religion and our sex-negative society. You can do a deep dive into her work on dralexandrasolomon.com. Each horizontal conversation is between 2 and 5 hours long and divided into 2 parts, except for the 5-hour-long one, which was divided into 4. Part 1, like this episode, is available in all the podcast places, and Part 2 is available exclusively to patrons of the Horizontal Arts. A great big happy dance welcome to my newest patrons, Jacob, Hannah, and Michael, Elisa, Amanda, Becca, and Dominique, Helena, Matt, Farah, Bob, Eric, and Joe. And an extra excitable happy dance to Rex for doubling their pledge this month. Here's the deal with the happy dance. I come from anxious and depressive stock. I'm also a recovering perfectionist. No accomplishment was ever big enough. I would look at celebrities and compare in despair. Nothing I achieved felt like success. I felt good about it for perhaps half a second, and then recommenced thinking about other people who had accomplished so much more. Now I'm in the process of rewiring my nervous system for celebration and joy. I decided approximately a year ago to celebrate every accomplishment, no matter how small, no matter how big, with comparable enthusiasm, hence the happy dance. Every time I get notified of a new patron, I stop what I'm doing, wherever I am, literally, on the subway, in the hot tub, at the podcast conference, and do an elaborate happy dance that lasts for a solid 15 seconds at least, long enough for me to bypass any bit of embarrassment and to viscerally feel the joy rush through my body. I made this pact with myself when I was in college. I determined that the compliments I think in my head don't belong to me, and if they don't belong to me, I need to return them to their rightful owners, who are the people that I think them about. Having this philosophy has spread a lot of joy that would otherwise never have been actualized. So, in much the same way, I think that happy dance belongs to my patron, and now I'm making a happy dance video for each and every new one. So for access to the full horizontal, all the part 2s going back to the beginning, and next week's episode with Dr. Alexandra Solomon, as well as for your very own happy dance video, become a patron of the Horizontal Arts on patreon.com/horizontal with Lila. It's spelled patreon.com/horizontal with Lila. And it's like the love child of crowdfunding and a subscription service. In this, part 1 of my conversation with Dr. Alexandra Solomon, I talk a lot. It's just so lovely to have a capaciously compassionate therapeutic ear. I've missed that. We talk about wedding burn, a microdose and my little secret, compersion, sexual boredom, and novelty drive, choosing non-monogamy out of fear, the gendering of purpose, how college-age Alexandra met her husband and had to recalibrate all of her ideas about masculinity. We talk about what lies at the intersection of your skills, your passion, and your pain, which is the question I encouraged Patrick to ask himself in order to seek out his purpose. Alexandra teaches me about the attachment styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disordered. We talk about neediness, turn-off, and uncertainty, the difference between separation and shame, and her definition of loving bravely. Alexandra shares how she had decided that she could only be the smart girl, not the pretty one, and how today, in her adult life, she holds space for study and scholarship and love and sex, all to coexist. Now come lie down with us in Midtown Manhattan, New York, New York.
What's a burner wedding? Like Burning Man?
So these people met at Burning Man, and they wanted to have their wedding at Burning Man and bring their people, but they had 100 people they wanted to come to this wedding. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to get 100 tickets. And so they instead made a mini Burning Man.
Aww.
And I worked on this art car. So it was kind of part labor, part hostessing, part performance art was my gig out there. So they had an art car to make it feel a bit more like the burn, and they had these beautiful bell tents, and they brought in a lovely bathroom truck and beautiful catering. It was really quite remarkable. And then while the ceremony was happening, there was a little bit of rain right before, and then there was a rainbow, and then there was a double rainbow. Aww. And then it started pouring, and I have this video of the guests at the wedding running with the furniture back into the TV.
Sweet. Oh, wow.
And then the bride and groom did a photo shoot in the torrential downpour that followed.
Yes, that's going to be so
running around in the mud. I mean, it is.
Show their babies 20 years from now.
Wow.
That's neat.
It was spectacular.
Oh,
it was
that's cool.
Truly spectacular.
Good for them. Neat to be part of.
Yeah. I was really grateful for the inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that won't be my wedding, but I am dreaming about what my wedding will
sure.
be.
And that just like busted your paradigms, right? Because you're like, oh.
Of what can be done.
I didn't know we could do that.
I never thought about going to the Black Rock Desert and creating a mini Burning Man. Right. So I'm thinking my wedding can be a festival, essentially, of
that's neat.
The people I love most in the world.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a secret that I probably won't air, but so for probably 10 years, I've had a Pinterest board called Wedding Dreaminess. And I'm a pretty unconventional person. I don't necessarily want to get married legally. Mm-hmm. I will probably have a very unconventional marriage. I'll probably have a non-monogamous marriage. Mm-hmm. So I don't want a conventional wedding. I don't want a conventional marriage, but I definitely want a wedding. Yes, very much. To curate an event like that, to prevail upon the people that I love the most in the world, to be in the same place at the same time. Right. When else do you get to do that?
You know, ritual. Yeah, it's such a sacred ritual.
The ritual. I love ritual and kind of abhor religion. So,
right.
So I long for ritual and want to cultivate it in all these different ways in my life.
Yeah.
And I was browsing on Instagram, and I follow Alice Temperley, who's a British designer of beautiful gowns. I came across this gown, and it's blush pink, sequined and embroidered and flowered. And I thought, that's my wedding dress. And I was like, oh God, Lila, really?
You're not going to buy this.
and the voice is like, yeah, it is. Go ahead, click on it. I was like, okay. And I clicked on it and took me to the website, and it's $3,500 and sold out. And so I put myself on the waiting list.
That's amazing.
And then they send me an email a week later that it's back in stock. And I go on the website and it's sold out. And then a week later, I'm scrolling on Pinterest because I want to add it to that wedding dreaminess board. Right. And I find many photos. And one of the photos that I find says the words "in stock." And I'm like, oh my God, really? Is it? So I go and it's in stock and it says one left in stock. And I was like, there's no way. It's never your size.
Right.
And it's my size. And not only is it the only one left in stock and my size, but it's $2,500 instead of $3,500. Nice. I'm like, oh my God.
The universe is making it really super clear.
I am buying this wedding dress. And I bought it.
That's so amazing.
And this morning, I kind of snuck out of bed. My partner was still like half dreaming. And I had my housemate, Morel, pick it up and hide it in her room. And I went down to her room and I tried it on.
For the first time?
At 9 a.m., yes.
Okay, what did you think of it?
It's gorgeous.
Oh.
It's stunning. It's
oh.
Yeah. So I have a wedding dress.
That's amazing. Are you going to tell your boyfriend?
No, not yet. It's we're very, very early.
Okay.
But
oh my gosh, that's so funny.
And my mom was like, well, I think it's funny to get a dress before the groom.
Yeah.
And I was like, you don't understand, Mom. I am unconventional.
Right, that's right.
I am moving towards what I want in my life. Don't you know that you want to create the conditions for the thing that you want in your life?
Right.
You know? And then I told my dad, and my dad is always supportive. And I said, Dad, I told him the whole story, and he said, well, that's lovely. And I said, Dad, would you loan me the money so I can pay off the credit card and I'll pay you $100 a month? And he was like, sure.
Oh, jeez. That's great.
I love my dad.
Oh, that's sweet.
He's so good.
That's an amazing story. That's a great story.
I've been courting Dr. Alexandra Solomon for quite a while and talking with her people. I think I have 35 emails that it took to get on a bed with this woman. But I'm very, very, very glad to be here.
Me too. I'm glad we're doing this.
I feel, well, I suppose your therapist-ness must have many people feeling very comfortable revealing to you.
Yeah, that's a real honor. Like I feel really lucky that this is the life I get to live and that I get to, we just did a book signing today and I just was again like taken by just the stories I get to hear and the things I get to witness. Yeah.
As I was out at this wedding gig, I rarely use drugs. And when I do it very deliberately and very consciously and ritualistically, a kind of sacrament. And in this case, acid was offered to me and a microdose. And I'd had one time 3 years ago, I'd taken acid on a trip to Maine, a romantic trip to Maine with this man that I thought, oh, he's going to be really important in my life. And he was really important in my life to show me that being enamored can be entirely one-sided or almost entirely one-sided. I learned a lot from that. But that was my only, so we were on a little Maine island, and there was water, and there were 4 of us, and fresh lobster, and the moon, and the outdoors, and sex outside. My first time having sex outside, and all these firsts. So that was my only other acid trip. And I have rules for when I engage with substances like that, which are, I have to be around people that I feel very comfortable with, and so I feel very taken care of. And I need to be out in nature, and I need to have nothing pressing the next day that requires great attentiveness. So all these conditions were met at this wedding gig. And so the day of the wedding, I think it was during the ceremony, or right after the ceremony, while we were in the bus, and there was the torrential downpour, and they were taking their downpour
photos,
wedding images, bride and groom images. I allowed it to take me on this beautiful journey. And when I had done it 3 years ago, it really showed my mental state to myself, which was one of great longing and not enoughness, and wanting to be chosen and knowing that I wasn't. And it was a demoralizing and partly devastating experience. It was also beautiful, right, to have that altered reality. And this time it shows me the shift in my mental state, because I was overcome with the glory of my life and what I get to do. I get to go out to the desert to work on an art car and celebrate love, and dress up in shiny things, and play. And I have somebody who cherishes me now deeply, and we're beginning to navigate non-monogamy together in a very loving, conscientious way. And I had my first experience of real compersion, where he was with a lover of his, and I knew in advance, and I was just exhausted. And he said, well, how would you feel if I went to see Catherine tonight? And I said, I feel fine about that. I'm just exhausted. I'm ready to be asleep. I need to get up early, and I'm recording tomorrow and all this. And he went, and I still felt good about it when I woke up. And I still felt good about it when he told me about it. And he told me about it, and I was like, well, tell me more. And so he told me about it, and in the context of our sexuality, and I loved it. I still feel good about it now. And he's had another night with her while I was away, and I still feel good about it. And I'm like, this is amazing, because I've met her, and in person, we had this conversation where she said, I'm not sure what kind of relationship I want, but I'm looking for my person. I'm looking for my primary. And I said, I completely identify with that, completely understand that. And there are some schools of thought about it. And one school of thought is that any energy that you spend on a person who you know is not your person is taken away from finding your person. And there's another school of thought. And this school of thought says anything that juices you up, that nourishes you, that makes you glow, that gives you orgasms, that makes you excited, sends and radiates that energy out into the world and will bring people to you and potentially bring your person to you. And I said to her, we were at this gig that my partner is a musician who has not been playing in recent years. And so he's been jamming with a friend of his, and he got to play bass on one song. And so we both went to see him, and it was the first time that she and I were meeting. And I said, if it would be nourishing for you, if you can adopt this philosophy and believe it, that anything that makes you radiate will be more likely to bring your partner to you. Because I think it's, if you believe the other thing, if you believe that it's going to preclude you from meeting the person, then you're not going to meet the person.
No, because you won't even recognize them.
But if you can believe and feel that it will be nourishing for you, I would be okay with that and would want you to have that. And I meant it. Now it was tested, and I can see that I really did mean it, and I do mean it. And I feel so excited and proud of myself. I thought I was a person who was just incorrigibly jealous and would never be able to feel compersion. And so I'm just delighting in this night and the stars and I know that the mountains are all around us. There's a bonfire. There's a dance party happening. The art car has 10,000 LED lights on it, and people are dancing, and there's DJs playing until the sunrise. And what a life I get to have. And I'm so grateful to have the point and the counterpoint, to be able to see the internal shift in me, that when I was, kind of taken over by this substance, what I went to was gratitude and joy and deliciousness.
Which was just, it was just amplifying. It was amplifying and showing you,
Yes.
it was revealing to you what you're living in, that you have shifted from scarcity to bounty, and it's just being reflected back to you. That's neat. That's really neat. And paradigms that you were like transforming these paradigms, that you had a belief about yourself, that you are jealous and that this would be the way that you would be. And how wild that you're having this different experience.
Yes.
That's fascinating.
Because for 5 years, I've lived amongst polyamorous and non-monogamous people of all different kinds, swingers and staunchly polyamorous people, and, all different permutations of non-monogamy. And I would call myself poly-adjacent. Because
oh my gosh,
because I was next to them. But I was not,
you were not of them.
I was not of them, and I did not think that I was wired that way. Yet, if I look back at all of my relationships, which have not been that many and have been quite brief, the longest having been a year, I can see that I became sexually bored very quickly. Very, very, almost with a month, maybe, maybe a few months. And wow, that is data that lets me know that my novelty drive may be quite high. And I know intellectually that there are ways to navigate that, but I had not yet found a person that I felt safe enough to put them into practice with. Somebody whose commitment to communication, self-inquiry, and growth is so high as mine,
Right.
that we could walk together. I said to him very early on that being with him reminded me of the quote, "We're all just walking each other home."
I love that quote, Ram Dass.
And so we have been using that phrase of saying, and he's been saying, "I want to walk with you for a long time," which is beautiful. I've never really had that from a person that I felt that was maybe possible.
Hearing your story about how you're navigating this, I think is really important for me because I spend most of my time in a clinical space. The stories that I hear about people trying to see whether consensual non-monogamy could be part of their lives are oftentimes, I hear a lot of stories about women who are, well, not just women, who are feeling like they need to enter that space because a partner wants them
into
to.
it, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And so that, I think that I'm feeling like I really want systems for people to be able to discern love versus fear, right? Like I choose this from a place of, like you're saying, what you're noticing is a kind of reckoning around your own sexuality. Like, what is my sexuality? Where am I on a spectrum of novelty? Like, how much novelty do I need? How much can that happen with my partner? How much does that need to happen with a different partner?
Yes.
And how I hear how incredibly internal it is about your relationship to your sexuality.
Yes.
And then your space with your partner becomes a container in which you can explore that. And that's so different than feeling like you just have to enter
Absolutely.
that space in order to keep a partner around.
And I see and hear a lot of that. And that makes me very, yes, in my community. And yeah, it hurts. Rather than being a dojo or a playground, it feels like another constraint, except it's the other way around, right? Instead of being constrained to monogamy, constrained to one person, people are feeling like they actually have to open in order to keep their partner, and that it's not really native to them, that decision. for a long time, I had the concept that perhaps under the circumstances of feeling secure, because nothing is secure, nothing is actually safe.
Right.
But feeling secure in somebody's love for me and my chosenness, I had the idea that I might be available for all kinds of things, all kinds of possibilities. And that is starting to perhaps prove true in that I can foresee threesomes make up 95% of my fantasy life. And I have pretty consistently used a threesome fantasy to come with any partner, regardless of how attracted I was to them, regardless of mechanically how skillful they were or how our bodies fit. I've usually used that to push me over the edge. And I have lots of ideas about that. When I read Arousal, The Secret Logic of Sexual Fantasies, that really illuminated things for me about how I make it safe for myself to be aroused. But I can imagine enacting threesomes with him, foursomes. I can imagine having an ongoing lover relationship that feels really nourishing to me that's outside of him. I can imagine him having that. I also can imagine the threat, what feels potentially threatening to me, is a friend of mine that he was interested in seeing and maybe developing a sexual relationship with, who I had the story and the feeling that he was going to fall in love with. That would be way more complicated for me. And I think for most people, even as an organizing principle, my friend Steve Dean, who I'm about to release his episode, my friend Steve Dean thinks about it as a startup. And so you're dividing your equity, right? And if you divide it too much, it's not very viable. Right. My former lover, Michael, talks about this, how he noticed that in his engagements with non-monogamy, he wound up in these sort of minimum viable relationships. And that he didn't want to do that. And I certainly don't want to do that. That does not work for me.
Well, you keep using you've used the word chosen. Like you really value feeling chosen. Like that, the language I would use for that is like secure attachment. Like you really, you value secure attachment. You value knowing that your partner has your back. That's really central to like being a mammal, really. Like that's so mammalian, just the idea, like we're so relational. Our nervous systems are wired to each other, right? We soothe each other. We escalate each other. And so I hear that that's like what you really value about your primary relationship is that you guys he's a secure base for you and you for him, I'm sure. And then from that secure base, you're starting to play with exploration.
I think he feels a little bit more, he's very, very clear that he is choosing me. And I am less ready to say, yes, let's go off into the distance together, because I'm not as sure. Him being 10 years younger than me, and being in a place where he's starting to figure it out, and also maybe me needing to let go of some ideas of what I thought it was going to be like. I feel a little embarrassed to say this, but I really thought that I was going to marry a film director.
Well,
it's so,
so specific.
So specific, and
that's funny.
Because I was an actress for many years.
Yeah, so it only makes sense.
I need to do some unraveling about what's important about that to me. I think largely it probably comes down to my man having his purpose well in hand and really going for making his purpose manifest in the world. I think that's what that represents to me. And my partner is still discovering his purpose. And so I almost see superimposed over him the man that he can be and I imagine is going to be. And I still love him now. He's an amazing human now. But I'm wondering, can I nurture as he grows into that man?
Right. Yep. Well, dang. I mean, that's got legs everywhere, doesn't it? Because there's something really gendered about that also, right? About just that idea of having a man with a purpose is sort of different than a woman with purpose, because man with purpose links us to the entire archetype of provider.
Yeah.
And so that's another paradigm that you are watching yourself wrestle with, of you're 10 years down the road, further down the road
Yes.
of life than he is. And so there's a way that you inhabit like a more traditional sort of masculine archetype around just sort of wisdom, maturity, clarity of vision that wouldn't make sense to expect it of somebody who's a full decade earlier in his journey. And so there's something I imagine for you that's getting reorganized around the construct of man,
And I know how much I enjoy that archetypal paradigm.
Sure.
I know how much I enjoy being picked up and thrown on the bed. I know how much I enjoy when a man says, "Don't look at the check." That those more traditional things are pleasurable for me. The polarity is pleasurable.
Yes.
To be allowed to be, softer and more playful and just, just to exist and to flow and to be the more emotional one. And there is, I would say, more balance here that I'm playing with.
And the ways in which like the construct of providing, the concept of provider has historically been a concept tied to money and resources. But I imagine there are ways in which this man provides for you in all kinds
Incredibly.
of ways. So then there's polarity created there, right? He holds this while you hold whatever.
Absolutely. The emotional processing, the ability to deconstruct, the willingness to spend that time. He cooked breakfast for me this morning. He cooked breakfast for me yesterday morning. When I arrived, he had Thai food ready for me. Yes, there are many, many things that this man provides for me.
Well, and at the level of the macro, like when I look at our culture right now, like I think we're going through such a freaking birth right now of birthing a new way, like entire paradigms, right? This whole, like just this presidency, this Congress, like all of what's happening right now, like there's so much happening around women just being like, okay, fucking no more. Like just let me do it. Like let me just do this. So there's something I think about like a man who can hold space while she goes forth and while she expresses fully. I think there's something really beautiful about that. I will just say, for him to sustain you while you declare what you're declaring, I think it's really beautiful.
The way that he sees my work, really sees what I'm doing and the value in it, and does anything that he can to cultivate and help and support. I need that. I need that from my man, I've realized.
That's cool.
Go ahead.
In terms of like the man archetype, like I wrote about this in Loving Bravely. My husband Todd and I have been together for, it'll be 21 years this summer.
Wow.
So we met freshman year of college. We lived across the hall from each other in the dorm. And I'm this like really tall, really large, like I take like a spacious woman, and he is, and he's this like small guy, he's much shorter than I am. Really? And so when we first met, like he was so funny, kind, really genuine. And so we developed a really deep friendship. And we had this same group of friends. We developed the same group of friends in the dorm and would, party together and study together and all of this. And it would always be the two of us. We would end up sort of somewhere in the corner, just like cracking each other up. And he developed feelings for me before I developed feelings for him, because he didn't fit in a construct for me, And
it was not your idea of boyfriend.
No, and not at all. And what really helped, I started studying women's studies and started to like look at these constructs, masculinity and femininity, and that really helped me bust through, because I'm from a family of really very traditional masculine men, like flannel shirts, hunting, fishing, tools, like those kinds of things. Wow. And Todd is not that, but he is an anchor and a rock and holds his masculinity in a way that I just had to reorganize. I had to reorganize so I could open myself to that and experience like polarity in a different way than what I had thought it would be. Right.
The power of his masculinity is that he can lead men's groups. Mm-hmm. He's the man that those men need. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. To open them up so that they can have more full, more rich lives, that they can be attentive to what's going on inside them, Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I've been just offering some questions about how he might marry I'm not going to use that word. I'm going to say how he might.
What?
How he might find something that feels like what he's meant to do in the world by looking at his skills, which are engineering. He fixes all the things, he builds all the things. His passions, which is this internal work, this self-excavation, this men's work, and his pain. What is, and I've been posing this question, what work is at the intersection of your skills, your passion, and your pain?
Beautiful. Wow. That's a powerful place to work.
I think that will at least lead him along, towards something. It may not be the thing, but towards.
I tell you what, the way that men, I love men working with men around this stuff. But the field of mental health, like my classrooms are mostly female and female presenting folks, and that's really important. And there are ways in which I think men can speak to men in a way that women can't. So I love, first of all, that he has an engineering brain, because that's a really systematizing brain. And I think that can be a really safe way into emotion, is through that like a little bit more left brain, systematizing way into emotion. So I think that's a really neat entry point.
I really believe that he is a man to speak to men about these things, that he will be able to break them down in a way that is palatable for the man who's worked, 20 years in startups and never thought once about what something feels like on the inside of his body. And he can talk to those men in their language and then give them new vocabulary.
Yep.
So I think that's remarkable. You said something about this being secure attachment. Can you explain to me the attachment styles? Because I've often thought that I was anxiously and avoidantly attached. I think I feel confused about maybe it's different behaviors at different times depending on how I'm feeling.
Well, so the field of attachment science started back in the day. There was the idea that human beings like babies attached to their mamas because mamas provided milk. Like that was the attachment was based on like, you nourish me physically and that's why I'm attached to you. And then the very first attachment scientist, like remember in Psychology 101, there was like Harry Harlow's monkeys. Like he would take these monkeys, separate them from their mamas, which is wouldn't be able to, I don't even know if you could do that study today because it's wretched. Yet we do it at the southern border, separate babies from their mamas. Like it's so, anyways, it's just horrifying because babies and their loving adults need to be together. So he would separate baby monkeys from their mamas and then put them in a cage. And there was a wire mama that would provide milk. And then there was a cloth mama that was soft but didn't provide milk. And the monkeys would go to the wire mama to get the milk, and then they would quick as they could get over to the cloth mama for nurturing.
I just got chills on my legs hearing that.
And so this was the first time science was able to say like attachment is actually about comfort and touch and soothing. It's not just transactional. You give me something. And so then it became studying humans and the ways that human babies attach to their mamas. And there was all these studies where they would they would separate the child from the mom briefly and then study how they reunited. And from watching those interactions, they kind of categorized all of us. And they said that by 18 months, you have an attachment style. And if your mom leaves you and then she comes and you reunite and you go to her and you give her a hug, you're securely attached because it shows that you missed her while she was gone, and then when you got back together, you were really happy to see her. That was secure attachment style. And then avoidant attachment style, she left, and then when she came back, you ignored her. That was avoidant attachment style. You just you kind of shut down in the absence, and then you just didn't really open back up. And then the anxious attached was, she left, And when she came back, you ran to her and you just fell apart and you were like inconsolable. Then the fourth kind would be a disorganized attachment style, which is when you get reunited, you hit her and you run away from her and you run back. Like you're not sure what to do with her. You're like kind of all over the place. And then the next wave of attachment scientists basically said that when we grow up, we replicate, that we take, so we have an attachment style with our primary caregivers by 18 months, 2 years old. And the idea was that that's your attachment style forever and ever. But then these next researchers kind of were like, I think that actually
doesn't seem reasonable.
Right. And so then they would watch how, like we do tend to replicate attachment styles from childhood. We do bring those patterns into adult relationships. So if we're avoidantly attached, we do tend to be avoidant in our relationships. But the amazing thing is that it turns out, because love is so powerful, because intimate relationships are so powerful, people change attachment styles in their relationships. So there's a whole branch of therapy called emotion-focused therapy. So Susan Johnson is the founding mother of this branch of therapy. And it's one of the most well-researched branches of therapy around. And she's tracked how our attachment styles change in the context of a healthy relationship. So she'll start therapy with a couple and they'll both have, usually what it looks like is one anxious person and one avoidant person.
Yep.
Because it looks like a pursuer, a distancer. Like one person's always like, can we talk? Are we okay? What's going on? You seem distant. Are you okay? Let's make love. And the other person is just like, is the distancer, like more shut down, more pulled back, needs more space.
Give me space.
And that becomes a dance, a pursue, withdraw dance. And it's an insecure dance. Nobody feels good. Nobody can let down. And so the therapy then is about creating safety and creating a sense that you see me, you have my back, I can be vulnerable with you, I can lean on you. For the anxious person, it's about being soothed. And for the avoidant person, it's about like coming home, like landing, opening up, trusting, sharing, exposing, deepening. And that kind of reset, recalibration can happen in therapy. And so then the relationship becomes the secure base.
This is so powerful for me to hear. I was told that early on I rejected milk at some point. And I imagine that would be an early indicator of avoidant attachment, right? You went away or something. I don't want your milk anymore.
Because it's really scary to need. It's really scary to long. It's really scary to be open. There's an illusion of safety by saying, I don't need you. I can do it on my own.
And then the dance that has played out over the past 2 months since I met my partner, Patrick, was that we recognized that we were playing out our, I suppose, attachment styles, I would have said patterns, with our mothers, where he was always wanting more attention from his mom than she was willing to give because she was very purposeful. First clarinet in the orchestra and working a lot and couldn't get, he could not get the nurturing that he craved. And my mother is bipolar and has a lot of loneliness and a lot of emptiness that is unfilled. And she has, in my mind, tried to make me fill that loneliness. And I have always rejected and resisted and pushed away. When I first met him, I thought he was beautiful. I was sexually attracted to him. The first night he came over, I thought he was beautiful. I was sexually attracted to him. He lost his erection. I was like, it is okay. There's so much pleasure that a soft cock can receive. And for the amount of time that I want to be making love to you, it's bound to happen many times throughout the course.
We have a long night ahead of us.
That's right. Throughout the course of this encounter. Right. And he felt much more secure and much more relaxed. And then very quickly, we fell into this pattern of his sort of neediness and me pulling away. And as soon as I felt him to be needy, I was turned off and my libido just shut off like a spigot. And we were playing that out for a couple of weeks but able to articulate it, able to talk about it as it was happening or very, very soon thereafter, but unable to shift it, not knowing what to do. And so I, at a certain point, said, I feel like I'm constantly hurting you. This does not feel healthy. I think we probably are going to be the healthiest as friends, because I just did not want. And what I wanted from him is what I want from my lovers, which is often an aggressive sexuality, biting, spanking, physical force. I enjoy the dominant play. And he did not feel safe enough. He said that he enjoyed doing that, but that he didn't feel desired enough to feel safe enough to want to do that.
Yeah.
And it was sort of this chicken or the egg loop.
Sure.
This unvirtuous cycle is what it felt like, right? It's like this
right?
terrible loop. And how are we going to? And it was like, well, I don't think we're going to get out of this loop, I said, and that's a shame and it's heartbreaking. And then we went to this cuddle party and I watched him with great gusto and passion cuddle this friend of mine. And I was like, and I felt this maelstrom of things. And they were jealousy and anger. And how are you cruising at this cuddle party I invited you to? And arousal.
Yeah. There it is.
And lots of arousal. And it cut the loop and opened up the string. And then it opened up a whole conversation and revelations for me about my jealousy and how that's always been mixed with my sexuality, the threesomes that have always been, in my fantasy life. And we were able to just open up and talk through all those things and then use them in our sexual life. And it has completely opened up the possibility for us to be romantic partners, that shift. So I really owe her a debt. I should thank her. And they were
That's fascinating.
potentially going to, they went on a coffee date. They were potentially going to become lovers because of her and her own feelings and her own concerns, not just related to us. That's not happening or not happening at the moment.
Yeah.
But I was open to that and also open to all the juice,
Right.
that would stir up in me. I was recording with Jeffrey Miller, who's an evolutionary psychologist and professor of human sexuality. And he was saying how common that is and how people don't want to admit it. But he's saying how good threesomes can be for relationships. And because as Esther Perel says, it navigates the presence of the other.
Right. Well, that is the threesome fantasy is Justin Lehmiller's book that just came out about sexual fantasies. It's the number one sexual fantasy is
For men and women.
Yeah, for men and women across the board, for all of them. And the other, right. And then the Esther piece I was thinking about, right, is that when you watched your partner, so when you experience your partner as needy,
Yes.
you shut down sexually.
Totally.
Because there's no synapse. There's nothing to cross. He's there. He's available. He's ready. When you watch him cuddle somebody,
and grabby.
you gotta, There's nothing. Yeah, and there's no space for you to express.
And there's a difference that I felt in even the way that he spooned me. When he spooned me and he was feeling needy, he pushed his head into my head, my chin tucked towards my chest. It hurt my neck. It felt trapped.
Yeah.
And when
That's how you feel with your mom, by the way.
Yes.
That's what your mom's
Love
presence feels like.
Feels like. And when he spoons me and he feels secure and he feels wanted, it's relaxed and cozy and juicy and delicious. He's still there. Yeah. He's still present. He's still willing, but it feels totally different.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to say that I felt that physical difference. So you're saying when he's needy, my sex drive dries up.
Yeah, because there's no like sort of
bridge. To
yeah, there's no you don't have to work. There's no work for you to do, and it sounds like you really like that sort of like, is it, isn't it? There's a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of not known. Is he mine? Do I have him?
Yes.
What is it gonna happen? And when he's like right up on you, there's there's nothing for you to cross there.
To navigate or to dance with.
Right.
I've been calling it a perceived lack of safety has been a hallmark of my sexuality throughout my sexual life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And has allowed me to be turned on. So you're a student of love. And I'm curious about where that started. Can you trace your fascination with love from an early age through your life?
This is how my TED Talk is going to start in 3 weeks. So my primary identity is nerdy and bookish. Like that's my first way of knowing myself. Like I was the girl with like her nose in a book all the time. And that I came to, in my little girl mind, I made a split that you had to either be a smart girl or a pretty girl.
Yeah.
And my mom is a beauty queen, like literally a beauty queen. Like she'll rock, I mean, she's won beauty contests, so that was sort of her genesis. And she also, like even now into her 70s, like she'll wear like a feather boa and sparkly makeup and like not even think in a high heel, not even think twice about it, So I felt like she occupied that space. And so I think that in my little girl logic, I had to be smart, and I was smart, and I took a lot of pride in being smart. That was my primary identity. But I have always been fascinated by love and by sex. And I remember as maybe like an 11, 12, 13-year-old, this was in the 80s, and Dr. Ruth was, she was a thing. And so I would on Sunday nights go into my room and like hide under my covers with my Walkman and listen to her show. But it felt like it was just like a dirty secret, like I didn't think I could be both those things, smart and interested in love and sex and intimacy. Those were like really different worlds,
That was reserved for the pretty girls.
Yeah. It was just I couldn't be all that. Like you sort of had to not be out with that.
This is a schism that I hear about a lot.
Yeah. And so then the next generation of that was in college. So I'm studying women's studies. And here again, I had a schism between women's studies and feminism over here, and then the study of love over there. Like I thought to be a feminist, I needed to study things like violence and body image and race and power. And that love was really just that. Who has got time for that? Because we're really trying to conquer social issues here, that love was really too feminine and too soft. And then in grad school, I needed to secure funding for my second year of grad school. And there was a position available at the Family Institute studying couples. And so I just kind of applied for that job and made up some story about how I was really interested in that. And I really wasn't, because I didn't think I could be. And then I got into it, and it really suits me. And it was like a reclamation of a part of myself I had lost, but I've always loved, I read romance novels as a kid. And so for me to be able to make space for all of that, for study and scholarship and love and sex, and like to kind of be able to just hold all of that has been really important for me. And we were talking before we started recording about how I still feel like I think maybe for all of us, or at least for me, this is true. I feel like I have to keep expanding my career to fit me, because I feel like there's a lot inside of me. There's a lot of different pieces and parts inside of me. And I keep taking risks of asking my career to hold more of me. And I think the older I get in this field, the easier it is to feel like I can ask my career to hold more parts of me.
Yes.
And I think I also learned, being able to work with people in their young 20s, where some of my students are just really revolutionary to me around ways they show up already as really complicated, smart and sexy and sexual and daring and shy, and sort of making less apology for all the ways that they already are, where I think that was such a long journey for me.
I'm hoping that we are making a shift towards authenticity genuinely being prized and being able to be integrated into people's professions. And obviously not all professions, because we still expect our doctors to be robots and et cetera. And certain things that require professionalism, quote unquote, those people are intended, forced, expected to have such a high aptitude for compartmentalization
Right.
that they don't let it bleed. But my hope is that in these areas like mine and like yours, where it's less striated, that there is more and more room for that.
And that for those who do have very role-bound jobs where there are boxes they need to fit into to get the job done, that they have intentional processes for de-rolling.
Yes.
So that when they go home, they get to be much more complicated.
Have outlets.
Yeah, and just okay, so I was that and now I'm this, like a transition home, I think especially.
Right.
Well, for any gender. But I'm thinking for I do a lot of work with really high-powered, hard-driving women who then need to go home and be all different parts of themselves. Like, I think there's something about reclaiming your sexuality when you walk back in your door and feeling authorized and entitled to things that are more about being than doing, right? Like, sexuality is really about just being and giving permission to have sexuality be a place of like restoration, so that then you can go back out into the world and do the things that need to be done.
I was thinking also, speech therapist by day, dominatrix by night.
Oh, right.
Which I know one of those.
That's amazing.
Or several, actually, because there's lots of people in my community that are not out, that have these wonderful outlets that allow them to, yes, feel expressed, even if it is separate.
And so there's a difference between separation and shame, right? Like a boundary, there needs to be a boundary. So there's a boundary then, because when my speech therapist self is forward facing, I'm in a role, I have a job to do, I have a task, I have a function, and then I can open up this other part of me in a separate space, and that it doesn't need to be like loaded up with shame, like that there's something wrong or dirty or bad about that. But there's a separation.
So you're making a distinction that separation doesn't necessarily mean repression, and that the key ingredient for a repressive way of going about expressing yourself would be shame.
Right. I was hired to do a speaking engagement, and the space that hired me, it was a very corporate space, and they had invited me in to do a talk on leadership. And then they had somebody on the committee had done a little bit of searching and had found that I also do work around sexuality. And they got really, really nervous about having me in their space. And I hadn't had this happen to me before. And I was able to talk to them about how absolutely, like, I would not be a very good couples therapist or relationship educator if I wasn't able to talk about sexuality.
Of course.
and I can read the room. Like, I can
Right.
I can be contracted for this kind of work and bring forward a different aspect of my expertise because I can hold a boundary. But I also felt, before I got to that space of being able to say that, the first thing I felt was shame. I felt so ashamed of myself, like I got found out, like that it was somehow dirty that I also do work around sexuality. And it was old for me, and it was really powerful. Like, it really caught me off guard a bit, and I had to do some work to kind of like ground myself and remember that actually there are different parts of me that come forward in different spaces, and I can put that to one side without saying that it's bad, dirty, shameful, wrong.
Like you would tell a child, it's okay to masturbate in your bedroom.
That's right. That is not a wrong behavior, but you need to really understand the space that you're in.
But read the room. Exactly.
Read the room. Nobody's trying to see that.
This thing in this room. I don't know why I just thought of Clue. I was like, with the wrench in the bathroom.
That's right.
I'm curious, you've probably done a lot of thinking about what bravery is. So what is your definition of bravery?
To me, bravery is the ability to stay present to uncertainty, to stay present to emotion, to start a conversation when you don't know where it's going to go. To just start with whatever small piece of truth you have your head around, and then just to go from there. I find I do this. I watch my clients do this. We silence ourselves if we can't script out. Like I'll have people say like, yeah, but I can't bring that up because I don't know where it'll go. I don't know how my partner, I can't say that because I don't know how my partner will respond, or I don't know what will happen if we start talking about that. So to me, bravery is about starting with that small, local piece of understanding that you have.
The microscopic truth.
Yeah, and then just saying, I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm going to put this piece out there, and will you meet me with it? Will you sit with me in this little microscopic piece of my truth, and can we just unfold it together or work it together?
Yeah.
That's so brave.
I'm happy to be in the not knowing with you.
Right.
Patrick loves very bravely. And that is probably above anything why he'd be a man I choose. Because I do not have much experience with men who love bravely. And I've rarely witnessed it. I know a few who are friends of mine who I don't have a physical attraction to. So I know that it's possible, right? I've seen it in action. But as far as experiencing it in relationshiping, never before, really.
Yeah. We're not really supported in doing that, and our cultural narrative is so much about making something good, bad, right, wrong, win, lose, powerful, powerless. Like we have so many binaries that just limit us. And so bravery is also about just gray, allowing there to be gray, allowing there to be not knowing, meeting something with saying like, tell me more about that. I want to understand how that is for you.
Yes.
I'm not you. Not you. Yeah, I'm not you. So, but I want to understand you. Holding space while somebody works something through, because we're so freaking relational that I mean, the vast majority of the time, I don't know how I feel about something until I've turned towards somebody that I care for, trust, and I can sort of start to listen myself into understanding, be listened into understanding.
Ooh.
Yes. And that's also brave. I think so much we think we have to figure all our stuff out, put it into categories, and then present it to somebody else.
Right. Like you're giving a PowerPoint. Like,
yeah.
let me give you the PowerPoint of my feelings at this moment, rather than what I often do is there's a piece of this, and there's a piece of that, and then this is also a piece, and there's a piece of it that's like this.
Totally.
like I did with his attraction to Adrian, right? I said, oh, there's a piece of it that's like, oh, we're just starting to become friends again, and I'm not going to want to be friends with her. Yeah. It's going to demolish our friendship. There's a piece of it that's like, I've never thought about her sexually, but now I am. There's a piece of it that's like, I'm worried about being rejected by her. There's a piece of it that fears that you're going to fall in love with her, and that she's actually better suited for you and more along your life trajectory, at this moment. There's a piece of it that is just totally turned on by the threesome aspect. There's a piece of it that fears that you will no longer choose me if she turns towards you. Like all these pieces are a part of it.
Well, and as you're doing that, what Patrick is doing is just like, he's got a bowl, his listening is like this bowl, and you're like putting all these little pieces into it, and he's just like, okay, what else? Okay.
What else is there? Yeah.
I love that. Versus some idea that you have to figure it out and just tell him thumbs up or thumbs down.
Right.
Good or bad. It's this or it's this. Because really nothing, when it comes to love, there's very little that's like this or this. But
right.
I think, so to me, it's really courageous to sit with the complexity.
And as he's standing there holding this bowl, he's also looking at each piece and saying, oh, so does that mean this? What I heard you say was, he does reflective listening and, will paraphrase in his own words to make sure that he's really with me and understanding me. And then he'll connect it to other things that he knows about me and say, oh, do you think that's this? And it's so powerful.
That's really powerful. How does he know to do that? Where does that come from in him?
He, I think, had a very powerful experience at a symposium of a men's group that I think he learned a lot of these tools from. He also opened up his previous relationship towards the end and did a lot of reading, like The Ethical Slut, and books around opening up that teach communication skills. But where he learned reflective listening, I want to ask him. I learned it from Mal Harrison because I briefly went to see her as a sex therapist with my ex, Alex.
Nice.
It's probably the most powerful takeaway that I got from that. And it's so simple. It's so simple. Yeah. And yet the egregious assumptions that we make, that because we know what the words mean in English that somebody says, means we know what they are actually intending with those words or what is underneath those words.
Right. It's so powerful to just hear somebody back. We underestimate it. We underestimate just like how, I think that's my entire week with couples is basically just helping them hear each other back and like really slow down. And I think that this is really gendered, but I think that we train boys to be solvers and fixers.
Yes.
And that's so antithetical to what's required relationally. And so that's a learning curve to really deeply trust, for a man to deeply trust that his inquisitive presence is really healing. He doesn't have to fix it. He doesn't have to fix it or solve it or make it go away, but to be present with it and to have empathy towards what his partner is saying. It's just really vital. And it's really horrific that we don't support boys, that men have to learn that instead of, and women have to learn it too, but there's something around like the gender conditioning that makes that really hard to trust. Seriously, all I need to do is hear my partner back. Yeah.
What do you mean by back?
Hear them back, like just reflect them back to them.
Yes.
Reflect my partner back to my partner.
I taught him a question that I learned from Bex, who's a sex educator. Bex Talks Sex. And it is brilliant in its simplicity. And it is, would you like empathy or would you like solutions?
Oh, I love that. Yes, I call that going meta. It's going meta, right? It's like talking about talking. What are you wanting here? I love that, right? Empathy or solutions? Yeah. Because sometimes, there are times.
Sometimes I'm like, fix it. Please fix it for me.
Just tell me what to do.
This episode was mixed and mastered by Irving Gadori. You can find him for all your audio needs, including recording live music, at igrecording.com. My lovely intro music was composed by Alan Markley. He's Plastic Cannons on Instagram. And my sensuous logo was illustrated by Shauna Shea, whom you can hire on 99 Designs. One of my key takeaways from the absolutely phenomenal Podcast Movement Conference in Orlando was the realization that I haven't been asking you to subscribe. If you enjoyed this episode, would you please take a moment and hit the subscribe button in your podcast player of choice? It makes a difference. Every subscriber helps me toward my mission of making this world a more intimate place. And if you found this particular episode with Dr. Alexandra Solomon powerful, would you share it with someone who could use a compassionate voice in their ear? Thank you. In next week's episode, part 2 of my conversation with Dr. Solomon, we discuss marriage, navigating mismatched libidos, the difficulty of being an academic in the field of sexuality, the faculty Greek chorus in her head, taking sexy back, teaching college kids how to communicate with their lovers, and the societal pressure for women to be beautiful while brilliant. Until next time, may you have someone, ideally many people, to love, something to do, and something to look forward to. I'm looking forward to a few days in Miami just for me. Thank you for listening, and thank you for getting horizontal.
You've been with him for 21 years, or you've been with him for longer. You've been married for 21 years. Would you say that you believe in marriage?